Is that normal? I don't know, but for me this is not normal. I think it's time to talk about pros and cons of living in Poland, because I've done videos about pros and cons of living in London that you can check it out on my channel, and also I've done pros and cons of living in Budapest. I compared living in Budapest and living in London together. I think that the video about Poland deserves its own spotlight. And as a Polish person, I'm not telling you that I'm an expert. I definitely want Polish people watching this video comment down below the things that they want to add, or maybe tell me that I'm absolutely bullshitting other people about. First, I want to give you a disclaimer that right now I'm living in my hometown, which is not a capital. It's a city, relatively medium size, I would say, by the seaside up north, and every city, as I mentioned before, has different vibe. Before I was living in London and that was capital, of course everything is different there. And then I was living in Budapest, and in Hungary they don't have a lot of big cities, and the Budapest of course was the main one as well. And now in Poland I decided not to live in capital because I really don't like the vibe of capital. It is very not only multinational and international, but also very touristic dense and overpriced. Let's start with pros, because I love to start on a positive note, and it is not like every place is perfect. We all know that everything will have its pros and cons, and I want to just tell you about those so you can determine whether this is something that suits your needs or it doesn't. I want to start with the first advantage, which is safety. I can't tell you how safe I feel in Poland. Maybe because everyone is suspicious and everyone suspect, or they're not trusting one another, so we are being extremely cautious as well. But generally I believe that Polish people are nice, even though they might be cold and reserved on the outside. But with the rising impact of immigrants around the world, and when I'm comparing life in London, for example, when kids were literally stabbing each other with knives in front of Superdrug on a random Wednesday afternoon, I'm like, what the hell? Comparing to that, this place is just so safe. Whenever something is happening, like there is some drama on the street, people are watching. We are really not tolerant towards disturbance of silence. So whenever something is happening on the street or maybe in the shop, people will look at it instead of walking past it. Like in London, people walk in pajamas, people scream, people stab each other, people run. Other people, they just walk past it like nothing happened, or they film it. Is that normal? I don't know, but for me this is not normal. So in Poland we might be not tolerant that much, but we will look into the direction of what's happening to check what's happening. And if we determine that something bad is happening, we are going to react. Last time I saw the situation in front of the shopping mall when the man was dragging another man out of the shop and they were screaming, and everyone felt, I felt at the beginning that this other man that was being dragged out was being abused. So there was like a whole group of people gathering around trying to determine who's in the right and who's in the wrong and what's happening. And then it turned out that this person who was being dragged out was actually a thief. So this man was trying to take him out because of course he doesn't want to have him in his shop. But in that situation you can see that nobody was passing by, everyone was checking, and then there is a greater power in the group. So if we are gathering a group and then we determine that something is happening, then another person will say to another person, okay, let's do something about it, and we will sort it out, the issue, much better than the police, because you know how police is. So although I wouldn't recommend leaving your bicycles on the street and things like that, I wouldn't feel like, you know, when I'm walking in the middle of the night in some suspicious alleyway, I would be stabbed or raped or anything like that. that maybe now I will be more cautious because of open borders, but this is something that is a problem everywhere, that you can't really trust another person or how they behave because of different cultures and because of different religions. But in general, I think I feel the safest in here, and I wouldn't say it's just because I'm Polish. It's just because when something is out of norm, people will look at it and people will pay attention to that. And it might feel like it's an extremely high intolerance towards unusual behavior, but at the same time, we are able to spot abnormalities much faster. The second thing is cost of living. Of course, if I lived in Warsaw, it would be much different, but I'm living in my hometown, which is a medium size, and we were able to find accommodation and live off of the set budget. I set a budget for accommodation and for food and for clothing and for things like that, based on realistically what I feel like it's comfortable living, and we were able to meet all of those, and our salaries go so much farther living in Poland than anywhere else. In Budapest, we were all the time in minus, or it felt like we couldn't really afford anything, and I don't know where those people were taking money from, or they were just maybe living all the time below their means, all their lives, not really dreaming bigger. In London, we had good salaries, but it felt like living for working. And here, it's a perfect balance of working and still being able to be alive and still enjoy and go to a theater, go to the cinema, go for a trip here, go for a trip there, take a flight here and there and stay in a hotel and just enjoy life, going to the restaurants much more often than in any other place that we lived. So we feel like this is a perfect place for us because not only are able to save a lot more money, but also we are not sacrificing that much of our lifestyle at all. And the house that we're living in, it's much higher quality than the one that we lived in London, that you can see on my first videos, that was literally falling apart, and you know how prices in London are. In Budapest, we had a decent flat as well, but it still took a lot of money from our paychecks, and now we're paying like literally 1/3 of only my salary for a whole house, which is insane. Of course, if you live somewhere else, like in Krakow or in Warsaw, I would say that the cost of living is much higher, but at the same time, supermarkets and transport is similarly priced. I would say that only accommodation would be much more expensive. But then also you earn more money if you're living and working in those cities too. Third thing is the lifestyle. Here, it is such a peaceful lifestyle. But also whenever I go back to London, I realize how fast people are there. It is all about the hustle culture. You go to Central, people are just like swamped together and you have to walk through there and you are stuck in traffic for hours and then you have to rush and you lose a lot of time, not only on fighting for your survival out there, but also on the travels. And I don't want to waste my life on things like this or rushing and not acknowledging that I'm living in the moment and I should cherish this moment. So here in my hometown in Poland, it is less of a flashy culture or a hustle culture. Most people work from Monday to Friday, some people work on Saturdays, and the majority of Sundays everything is closed except of local shops that are choosing to be open. But groceries, clothing shops are closed, making sure that those people can also rest, but also making sure that you are resting instead of going. Back in the days, there was this culture that everyone was going to a shopping mall on Sunday just to shop. And I think we were wasting all our day there. And now, because there's nothing to do, you can actually like acknowledge that someday is happening, you know, that like you need to be creative and go somewhere. Of course, you can go to a restaurant, you can go still to a hairdresser, you can take care of other things outside and go to a cinema and go to a theater. Those things are open, but it is all about either a culture or a nature or a family, which I absolutely love. It's not only about hustle, fast-paced cultures, everyone is running, and the life goes in a second in this way. So this peaceful lifestyle after living for years in London is really refreshing, that we feel like, yeah, you know, the days are so long, not only because it's a summertime, but also because we can not only do so much with the money we have, but also because we have more moments of like stopping and breathing and acknowledging that like, wow, this is really happening. Like today is Tuesday and it is really Tuesday. Like I can appreciate and I can acknowledge that today is this day. So you don't feel like the days are just passing by and you wake up and it's like 20 years later. Then the fourth advantage is the food. Of course, I can be biased because I'm Polish, but for years I was eating all the traditional Polish food, and then I moved out, and to be honest, after like years of living and eating internationally, I still love certain things, like of course dumplings, pierogis, and other things which are really specific to a Polish culture. And even my fiance, who is Spanish, and he likes the majority of things from Polish cuisine. So those things are definitely special. Sometimes they are just so simple, not only to make, but when you eat them, these are simple ingredients, not going over complicated. Even when you go to the shop and you're looking at the classic wafers or classic like Polish bars, like classic wafer is, let's say, Prince Polo. It's just a little bit of like a dark chocolate with wafer and not that much chemistry, not that much overcomplicated flavors. It's just a simplicity, and the majority of the time you can see that in traditional Polish cuisine. Also, we use a lot of fermented food. It's a little bit like, you know, Asian and kimchi, but we have sauerkraut and fermented cucumbers and even fermented beetroot, and we make soups out of it. And I think that for some people it could be too sour. All those things are too sour, but they are so specific. Or for example, for a dinner we can eat a pasta with cheese and strawberries, yeah, like a strawberry sauce, or rice with apples which are like baked, and then serving it with like a sour cream and sugar. They're not the most nutritious foods, but it's incredible how people came up with that. Like, why sweet dinner? We have so many dumplings with, for example, blueberries or strawberries. We use seasonal fruits, especially apples, and other things during the summer like strawberries and blueberries, and we like to put them into flour-based things. We even have our equivalent of gnocchi, which are called kopetka. They're just bigger, but basically the same thing. So it's incredible how versatile it is, this cuisine is, but also how tasteful it is. Like certain flavors, sweet and sour, are just unique, I would say, and everything is much healthier than I think comparing to other cuisines like British food, not of course Mediterranean diet. It's not like a Mediterranean diet. It's a little bit more heavy and fat focused and more on carbs, but also more on meat like pork. But the variety, I think, wins. And another advantage which I absolutely love is the nature access. Everywhere, like everywhere, you have trees around, you have like mini parks everywhere, majority of the cities where you go, they are surrounded by forest. They are still surrounded by forest. There is a lot of mini rivers or big rivers. We have a lake district in Poland. We have lake here, like there, like random ponds everywhere. We have mountains or hills. We have absolutely everything. Even the sea, which is like the least salted sea on earth, and it's always cold, but it still counts. I live by the seaside and I don't go there very often because it's not like a Spanish holiday vibe by the sea. Nature is absolutely everywhere, and you know how nature has a calming effect. You have always somewhere to go for a walk, which I think in a bigger cities or international cities where they just put the emphasis on growing and developing infrastructure, these things are being cut down and just being eliminated. And then what? Well, I cannot imagine just living in a block of flats and all the time just see other buildings. Like, I am a nature creature and I need to go somewhere to at least walk around the trees. And this is possible in Poland. And the last advantage is that it is less touristy. Of course, for us Polish people, certain places are more touristic than others, like Krakow, like Zakopane, which is like a mountain town, and then Warsaw. We know where to go, especially on holidays, or Tri-City for summer. We know the places, but because the rest of the world doesn't really come here to Poland, we have more space for ourselves. And some places are truly beautiful. They are so untouched by humans. For example, Lake District, which is in northeast part of Poland, or in the south of Poland, where we have mountains, but also really fast, really shallow and really narrow rivers where you can just go kayaking, you can go camping, you can try rafting, you can go for an amazing adventure. And the weather during the summer is really hot, so you can really enjoy that true holiday vibe. And I don't think people know about it. People probably think that Poland is a part of Russia and it's super dangerous, and what it is, but actually you can have such a great time outside in nature, I would say. In the cities, they are just normal cities where food is quite affordable and Polish food is tasty, and there is cheap alcohol for parties if you're into it. But what I would recommend is to try something in nature, because in Poland there is a lot of beautiful spots which were just untouched by humans at all. And now we can move to cons. These are the things that I'm just missing a little bit comparing to, for example, life in London, where everything was on a bigger scale and things were just different. The first thing would be international food quality. As I said, Polish traditional food, you can find plenty of good restaurants, but if you want to go for a pizza or for sushi or for ramen, the options are limited. In Warsaw, I've been seeing more and more places like that, but in a smaller cities, not at international, people do whatever they want. They just create a restaurant with pizza, pasta, with burgers, with absolutely everything, and you know how those restaurants are. They're absolute shit because you can't specialize in absolutely everything. And the sushi, I can't comprehend how you make, for example, sushi sets or just the majority of rolls with cooked salmon and Philadelphia, like the cream cheese. This is something that I cannot comprehend because I'm just used to normal sushi and not the things that, like, if I go for sushi, I go for raw fish. I don't want a cooked salmon or smoked salmon or a cream cheese everywhere. These are the things I can't comprehend, and these are the things that really bother me, that the ramen is trying to be not an authentic ramen or just not as tasty ramen. Like, they just go with whatever. As long as it's cold ramen or cold sushi, I guess people just accept that fact, but it's hard to find a high quality, a very tasty international food unless you know places. Another thing is a language barrier. In the bigger cities, it's not that much. And don't get me wrong, people on the street, people in the restaurants, people in the shops, they will speak a very high level of English because the education in Poland is very good. But you go to a government or you call, I don't know, insurance and health insurance, and they tell you, yeah, we speak English, and they absolutely barely speak English, or they create a form for international people, but they tell you to fill it in Polish. What? And don't get me wrong, of course I'm Polish and it doesn't bother me because I can translate it, but I can see how difficult it is for other people to actually follow that process because it doesn't make any sense. The bureaucracy is not as difficult as a Spanish one, but as someone whose fiance is Spanish and we needed to do all the paperwork for him, me being there was absolutely essential because somebody needed to really translate it and somebody needed to fill in all those forms, and sometimes I had to just pick up the phone for him because those people refused to speak English. So people on the streets and people in customer service, I would say that their English is much better than the people higher up. They are apparently giving you all the permissions to stay or the registration address, the PESEL, everything else. Sometimes they just refuse to speak English because they need to speak Polish because other people are listening to them. I don't know. I'm lucky enough that of course I'm Polish and I can just send my mum with my fiance and then they will communicate somehow between each other but sort out the things. But the rest of the people, I think it's much easier to go with someone who knows the language. Then we have career opportunities. I cannot lie to you that unfortunately, because it is a smaller town and Poland is developed in one area and not the other, not all industries provide such a possibility for growth and provide career opportunities. In London, everything is booming. Everything is about hustle culture. Everything is about development and just business. So there is more career opportunities there, although there is actually more competition too. But in Poland, for example, if somebody wants to have a remote job, this is more limited because this is not as acceptable and common around. And in certain industries, maybe working internationally but hired by a Polish branch, that might also be a little bit limited too. So for international people that want to come here, they would need to find a company that is open to that or another international company that they will be hiring people all over the world. We are just not there yet. It's still uncommon to see other people from different cultures, maybe in the bigger cities. Like for example, in Poznan, I believe that there is a big Korean community because one of the universities is actually offering Korean language to be taught, and they have a lot of Korean restaurants and students can practice there and later on have opportunities to work for big companies. And some of the big companies wants to have headquarters in Poland because it's definitely much cheaper. So I think we are developing in that area, but it is still not as common everywhere and not for every industry. Then we have a weather. Don't get me wrong, I'm used to this weather. Like, how can I not be used to that weather? In London, it was always cloudy, the sun was never there, and when it was there it felt like it is a fake sun. And nowadays it's extremely hot there too. I mean, global warming changed absolutely everything. And in Poland the climate is dry, which I absolutely love. During the winter it's not that cold, even though it can be minus 10 degrees Celsius, but because it's so dry it just doesn't like go into your bones, if that makes sense. It just doesn't feel that cold, or maybe it's just me that I'm just used to that, although my fiance is from Canary Islands and he says that Poland is not that bad. I think he got used to that as well too. And during the summer the climate is still dry, it is hot, sometimes super hot, up to 40 degrees, like generally in Europe. But because it is dry, I feel like people just don't sweat, or if they sweat, they just dry so quickly that you just feel like it is just not that hot. I mean, that's my personal experience. We have a very distinct seasons. We have spring, we have autumn, we have summer and winter, and if this is something that you don't like, the variety, that you never know what weather it's going to be, especially that between the seasons there is a confusion that sometimes can be super hot and the next day it's raining and it's super cold. So for example, in March the weather was all around, and then in September or October you don't even know what to wear because the change of the weather is just dramatic from one hour to another. I love the variety, but that comes with a price because you need to have like literally 4 different wardrobes for 4 seasons of the year. The last disadvantage, which I think that Poland is just still developing, is different services, or for example ordering food. Sometimes it can take absolutely like freaking hours. Like, I'm not joking, one time we were waiting 2 hours for a pizza. If you want to collect it, it will be in like 15 minutes. But if you want to have it delivered, it's going to be 2 hours. And don't get me wrong, my hometown is quite small, so I don't know what they are doing for those 2 hours, but for the food delivery you can really wait for ages. The couriers are okay. I mean, sometimes they lie that they've been to a place and nobody picked up, even though we work from home and we were all the time at home, and then they argue with you that you weren't there because they couldn't just knock on your door or buzz the intercom. But usually they are fast. So certain things can be still improved and certain things are just not that modern. Although we don't have any problem with ordering anything. We have Amazon. Back in the days there was no Amazon in Poland, but nowadays it is, and the delivery is fast. There is a lot of courier companies that are delivering, so the options are literally limitless, and we have InPost, which is super fast. Anything can be delivered within 24 hours on the area of Poland. So there are certain differences and certain standards, and I think with like retail or basically sales, we are just not there yet. And sometimes even with customer service, people are freaking mean to you. Because I don't know, maybe they just don't understand that the nice customer service comes with someone who is nice. I think people, especially in the admin roles in the government, you feel like you need to ask them and beg them, sometimes be extra nice and cautious, just so then they speed up things, or they are being helpful and they actually do something for you. Because if you tell them something back in the same tone that they spoke to you, then you might get a drama there, but they might be just very difficult. Like, it seems like they are allowed to do those things because they don't care, but you shouldn't treat them in the same way in exchange if you want to get stuff done. So I think the customer service is not that obvious here that it needs to be nice. That's why people don't really have a tendency to complain. I felt like in England, when I was working in hospitality in the restaurant, people could complain about absolutely everything. They ordered something and then they said, oh, I don't like it. Even though I ordered it, I don't like it and I want a refund for it. Even though you took responsibility and you took ownership of your choice, but just because you didn't like it, however you thought you would like it, suddenly we need to pay for this mistake. And that was acceptable in England, but here nobody complains. You don't like your food? I don't care. Or like, we don't care. You just don't say it and you eat it and you just basically never come back. Or maybe when you eat it, you just say like, oh, I didn't really like it. Or maybe you just don't eat it and that's about it. It's your choice and you're paying the price for it. So it is all about just minding your business, not walking around and saying, I don't like this, I don't like this, I don't like this. You paid for it, you didn't like it, you pay for a consequences with it. And next time you know better. It's that simple, but that could be also taken as something rude that people don't want to risk. For example, going to a new restaurant, because if they don't like it, they don't have balls to complain and say like, oh, do you mind just taking it off the bill? I don't know if that would be acceptable. I haven't tried, but I feel like I would feel extremely embarrassed doing so, even though in England it would be acceptable and it will be fine. Here, I don't know how would that go. If you want to try, let me know in the comments down below what would happen. But that's basically it. I feel like I mentioned all main pros and cons that I wanted to talk about and bring to your attention, that they are cultural differences, they are different societal norms, but it is also a different climate, it is also a different people, it is also different cuisine and just different style of living. It's basically everything different because it's a different country, but it can be good depending on what you like. So if you like this video, hit the like button and subscribe to my channel not to miss more videos like that and more videos about how to live your life on your own terms, because I love that topic. And I'll see you in the next video.